I beat myself up for years because of my silence, because I was a singer who wasn't singing. And I look at that now and I see it. The silence was part of the process. Voice and creativity, these are such sensitive things. There's such vulnerability in this form of expression. And sometimes silence is part of the process. What would sound be without the silence? That is the canvas upon which we create the music. There is power in the silence. If your voice has gone quiet, whether from fear or burnout or just life getting in the way, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about overcoming creative blocks as a singer, what they are, why they show up, and how to move through them so you can begin making music again. Welcome to Reawaken Your Voice. Are you tired of pushing aside your desire to sing, only for it to resurface again and again? Hey, I'm Lainey, voice and creativity coach, singer and songwriter. If you're ready to rediscover the freedom of creative expression, free from judgment, doubt, comparison, and fear, then grab that notebook full of ideas. It's time to give voice to the songs in your heart. Let's sing. Almost every singer, artist, or creative person in general has felt blocked. Creative blocks aren't a sign of failure, and it doesn't mean you're not meant to sing. They are simply a call to reconnect on a deeper level. Reconnect with your voice, your creativity, your why, yourself, your joy, your peace. So in today's episode, not only do I want to send out that call for vocal rebirth, for a deeper connection and a rediscovery of what has always been there within you. Your unique expression, your creativity, your voice. But I also want to share with you some practical steps that you can take to begin that journey of vocal transformation from feeling stuck, feeling silenced, feeling like your voice is lost, to opening up your expression, finding that sense of true, authentic voice, and bringing it out into the world in your own way, in a way that feels true to that voice. So first of all, what is a creative block? What are creative blocks really? Emotionally, mentally, sometimes physically. Well, a creative block is essentially anything that gets in the way of your ability to express yourself freely. So it could be fear, it could be self-doubt, it could be perfectionism, imposter syndrome, just general mental burnout. My personal experience with creative blocks is what led me to start this podcast and share this message in the first place. This message about reawakening your voice when it feels like it has gone dormant for whatever reason. There have been many times I've felt blocked throughout my vocal journey. I went through burnout after some really intensive classical training and living that performance lifestyle as an opera singer. And in the transition from opera to folk, from like an opera singer to a singer-songwriter, I moved through a lot of these creative blocks. A lot of obstacles reared their ugly heads and showed me what was lurking in the shadows of my creative mindset. After losing my dad and, moving through the stages of grief, I came up against a lot of creative blocks. I went through a period of time where I was hiding from my voice and hiding my voice from the world. There was a point in time when I was teaching voice, piano, and guitar, and I really got into a rut of teaching it the traditional way, the way I thought it was supposed to be taught, instead of finding my own voice as a teacher. And I think that's also part of the journey of finding your voice in whatever field you're in. But finding my voice as a teacher took some time, going from the way I was taught and thought I should teach to, I have my own style, my own way of teaching these things, and it's okay to express it in that way. And most recently, becoming a mother in the past few years has brought new creative blocks, reinventing the way that I weave singing and creating and music making into my life as my priorities shift and change. So whatever it is that you're going through in life, these creative blocks can show up in different ways and at different times, but it doesn't mean you're a failure or that you're not meant to be singing and making music. It's simply a call for realignment, for a pivot. Maybe you need to take a break. I know I needed a break after years of intense opera study and performance. Maybe you need to reimagine what music making looks like in a new season of life, kind of like me with motherhood. Or, rediscovering your voice after going through something that changed you. Losing my dad over a decade ago, it changed me. And the process of grief caused me to look at life differently, the world differently, my own mortality and spirituality, all of these things. So, maybe you needed a period of rest. Maybe you needed some time away to reflect and recalibrate so that you could come back to your voice and come back to your music and come back to singing and creating from a new place, from where you are now. So what you're experiencing is normal and it's okay. You can sing again. Some common causes of these creative blocks. Now we've talked about, what kinds of things can be happening in life when they come about. But to be more specific, these blocks can be having the fear of not being good enough. Or it can be perfectionism. They can take the form of past criticism or trauma, singing experiences that didn't go so well for you, painful experiences that caused you to shut down your voice. And it can also be just a lack of time and space or emotional energy to sing, to create. All of these things are very real as humans in life. And yet, as real as they feel, and as big and unmoving as they may seem, like this big barrier in front of you that you can't see the other side of, it is possible to move through these and to move through them with grace and ease. Doesn't mean there won't be some tears, some blood, sweat, and tears. Hopefully not the blood. Oh. But if you are gentle with yourself and give yourself some grace, you can ease your way back into creating with freedom that you're longing for. Now, I've touched on this a little bit, but I really want to make the point that creative silence can actually serve you. So let's take a moment to reframe the silence. I beat myself up for years because of my silence, because I was a singer who wasn't singing, because I was hiding my gifts and hiding my voice and hiding from my gifts and hiding from my voice, hiding from myself, hiding from my calling. And I look at that now and I see it was so unnecessary. I didn't have to beat myself up for that. The silence was part of the process. Voice and creativity, these are such sensitive things. There's such vulnerability in this form of expression. And sometimes silence is part of the process. What would sound be without the silence? That is the canvas upon which we create the music. We need silence. So maybe stepping back from singing, taking a break, taking some time away, or, that even if you're holding yourself back from your desire to sing, no matter how long you've been holding yourself back from that desire, maybe you simply needed that silence. Maybe you needed that rest. Maybe you needed some time for integration. You were learning new things. You were being prepared for it in different ways. And maybe you needed a realignment. When I was grieving the loss of my dad, I needed that silence. When I was shifting from opera to folk to writing my own music, singing other people's music to writing my own and singing my own, it was a total realignment. And so it's going to be a little clunky, a little messy, and it takes some time to realign and find that focus and step into it. So give yourself some grace and know that there is power in the silence. There is such potency in silence. Think about what your silence brought you. What were you learning? What were you moving through? What was shifting in you? This can really help you reframe that feeling of shame that you shut down your voice or silenced yourself. So we've covered, what are creative blocks? We've talked about what they can look like, how they can show up. And we've also kind of reframed that idea of silence and how it can actually be supportive in the creative process and in your vocal journey. But how do we move through these blocks? And how do we move through them gently in a way that is nurturing and nourishing to our creativity and our voice as it's kind of budding and blossoming again? Well, first of all, there needs to be a sense of awareness around the block, really acknowledging it, looking at it in the face and saying, this is what I'm experiencing. But you're naming it without putting shame or a heaviness to it. Rather than kind of pushing it aside and denying it, you're looking at it and seeing it for what it is. So maybe it's perfectionism. Like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. I think everything that comes out of my mouth needs to be perfect. And you take a moment and just look at it and let it be without judgment, without putting a meaning to it, attaching a heavy meaning. Just look at it for what it is. Secondly, we need to begin with small steps, gently, softly. So this can look like making any kind of sound with no pressure at all. Humming, sighing, speaking. Just gentle sound with your voice to begin awakening the vibration within your body again. Another thing you can do is to revisit your why. You know, I've talked about this in previous episodes, but it's so important to come back home to, why did you start singing in the first place? Why did you love singing in the first place? What drew you to it initially? And what is your voice really for? What is the true purpose of your voice? Next, you need to create a judgment-free space to get to know your voice again. You know, sing alone in your own solitude with no expectations, just expression, just exploring your voice, reconnecting, getting back in touch with what it feels like to sing, and letting go of any preconception of what it should feel like. It's okay if it feels different. If it doesn't feel good, that's okay too. If it feels trapped, if it feels stuck, if it feels heavy, if it feels like a burden, that's okay too. Let it be what it is. Because lastly, you need to let your voice be messy. Embrace the imperfection as part of this reconnection process. There is such beauty in imperfection. And we have to move beyond this idea of the perfect sound, the perfect tone quality. Come back to expression, singing for the sake of singing, creating for the sake of creating, reconnecting with your humanity and expressing that through sound, through your own voice. So my invitation for you is just take 5 minutes today and make any sound at all. It could be humming. It could be a single note on an open vowel. It could be a word. And notice how that feels in your voice, in your body, in your spirit, in your mind. Notice how all parts of yourself become present when you bring awareness to them. And remember, this is not a performance. We're not performing. We're simply expressing. Come back to expression for the sake of art. Another way of coming back to your voice is getting in touch with your inner voice through journaling. You know this. It's one of my favorite ways of reconnecting with the voice within, the singer within. Reflect on what's currently blocking your voice and write it down. And just let anything flow out that is connected to that. Anything that's all tied up in that, let it unravel on the page and see what comes through. And remember that these creative blocks, they are not the end of your story. They're a doorway. And your voice is still there, waiting to be heard. Thanks for listening, friend. If this episode moved you or inspired you in some way, would you please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share this episode with someone who's been praying for a vocal breakthrough? Until next time, keep nurturing that song in your heart. Lots of love.